It's like a lady stick. All right. The concrete and anchoring guide. All right. The concrete and anchoring guide. The concrete and anchoring guide is there to protect you from doing dumb things. The concrete and anchoring guide is also there so that you have a guideline as to how we would like you or expect you to install racks. As long as you, I'm going to use the term, as long as you adhere to the spirit of the form. If something ever happens to the rack, we obviously are going to send somebody out to see what happened. But as long as that person that goes out looks at it and goes, they attempted. We, Hunter and their lawyers will represent you in case something happens because you installed it, like we asked. Okay? If you decide to go outside the concrete and anchoring guide, we're going to take our fancy little lawyers with us, and you will be left to defend yourself. So, don't do anything dumb. Follow the concrete and anchoring guide. All right? Scissor racks, you probably have the most leeway on a scissor rack because a scissor rack, the only reason we bolt it to the ground is so that it just doesn't topple over in case someone hits it from the side, right? The surface mount in Power Bay is not actually bolted down. It just has what we call show plates. So there's a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch piece of steel that goes across the front. There's another 1/2 inch piece of steel that goes across the back. And we just use really little bolts to bolt the runways to the show plates. That's why they're on the carpet, so we don't scratch the floor. When we go to a show, we just came from NADA. The rack that we had at NADA was not bolted to the floor. We can't obviously bolt it to it's not our floor, right? We can't bolt it and then, knock the, otherwise, everywhere we go would end up looking like Swiss cheese. So a scissor rack does not use the floor for holding itself upright, right? A scissor rack is just up and down, right? So it's just a load on the floor. California is in a seismic zone. You're not working in Washington State, right? You are? Oh. Okay. If you're in a seismic zone, there are extra holes in the base plate that you're going to have to put extra anchors in, okay? When we give you a installation kit, the installation kit is for a normal, nominal installation. I'm not sure who decided what that was, but somebody decided what that was. So we give you like 6-inch long anchors. We give you 2 buckets of grout. We give you 3.5 gallons of ATF. We give you like 2 hoses, and then we give you like an extra piece of hose because we know this hose over here is going to be too short. So we give you like a 6-foot hose because this hose has to go all the way over and all the way around. If you need thicker grout, you have to buy longer anchors, right? The anchor still has to go into the concrete as far as it needed to when it was only this much grout and you got that much grout. So you can't use the regular anchor because then it'll be too close to the surface. And then you guys have all seen those 2-post lifts where they pull out and the anchor looked like it was embedded like a 1/2 inch into the concrete. Okay, so be careful of that. And we'll get to it in a second. So we actually tell you how long the anchors need to be depending on how much grout you have. Okay, which is good. But we're not going to give you now we give you enough nuts and bolts to sink the Titanic, in about 2 years, you'll have enough nuts and bolts. Your truck's going to be sitting on the rubber stops, right? The suspension's just going to be flat. But we don't give you all the extra anchors, okay? So it's your job you're going to have to provide your own extra anchors. Again, if you live in a seismic zone, we don't give you the extra anchors for the seismic zone. So you guys are going to be buying 4 extra anchors, actually 8 extra anchors per rack per install, okay? Washington State, you guys have won the solid gold Cupid doll for stupidity on installing racks. I don't know what's wrong with Washington State other than Portland is infecting it, evidently, from the left all the way to the... which is why most of Washington State wants to secede to Idaho in the first place, because Idaho is normal, Washington State is not. When you install, so I understand when you guys are wiring up the rack, the 220 part, you guys never want to make a permanent connection, right? Because you're not licensed electricians, right? So if you make a permanent connection either here or you make a permanent connection in the circuit breaker box, the panel, right? When the place burns to the ground, who are they going to blame? Because you're not the licensed electrician, right? So you can run temporary power to make the rack go up and down, because you have to make the rack go up and down on install day. Once again, the electrician is going to be of no help to you whatsoever, because this is never going to happen. So you're going to run lots of temporary power. You're allowed to run temporary power. You're just not allowed to make a permanent connection. Washington State, however, they take that all the way down to the 12 volts that runs the lights. So when he's going to install a lighting kit, he's going to put the lights up, he's going to run the electrical wire. He has to leave the electrical wires hanging. He cannot physically take that little crimp and crimp the wires together, because he's making a permanent connection. He cannot take the other end of that wire and loosen up the screw and put the terminal in and tighten that up, because he's making a permanent connection. Right? Only Washington State. No. So it's a permanent connection. Guess who can? No. The owner of the shop.
What? So you have to tighten the screw.
Yes.
Wow. Even this 12 volts should work.
Yes. Just in Washington now. Washington is a special kind of stupid.
What, you can touch the wires to test it? Make sure everything works?
He can make it. Well, he can't even do that, because the wires are just hanging out the rack, right? Because he can't take the red and the white wires. No, can't touch the Scotch lock, because it is a permanent connection. So he can get all the wires together, and then he can hold the wires, but the other guy has to come out and put the Scotch lock on and crimp the Scotch lock while he's holding the wires. Right? Only in Washington State.
Wire nuts?
Nope. Nope. It's a permanent connection. So I would move. I don't know why Washington State does it. It's weird. Okay. Matt Wise will have more instructions for you in about 2 weeks about Washington State, because he loves Washington State a little less than I do. So there's a bunch of crazies out there. They do a lot of crazy things. All right. Again, well, the concrete and anchoring guide is like when you're playing baseball. Okay, as long as you hit the ball between the foul poles, it's a home run. Right? You hit it into the bleachers on the third base side, or you hit it into the bleachers on the first base side, it's a foul ball. Okay, so just okay. All right. Excellent. We used to tell you how much concrete it needed right here, but we started making too many different lifts that needed different thicknesses of concrete. So now we tell you must be installed on a concrete floor as specified. Okay, which basically means you have to go into the installation instructions or the site requirements to figure out how thick the concrete needs to be. Okay. Yeah, anyway. Since I'm being videoed, I don't want to give out numbers. If I was just talking to you guys, I'd give out numbers. But since I'm being videoed, I don't want to give out numbers. But
pause the video, sir.
The other thing that has changed, I don't think it's on one of these pages, but I want to get to it now. A long time ago, back when I actually worked for a living, we only needed a 1/4 inch of grout. I mean, you could put that thing really, really close to the floor. The other thing they changed in 2022 is we now want 3/8 of an inch of grout, or 10 millimeters of an inch of grout. So you have to have a thicker pad, because what was happening on a 1/4 of an inch, it was so thin that it would get brittle, and then it would crack, and then the guy at night, the janitor, would sweep it all away. and then you wouldn't have any concrete underneath it. So we're asking for a little bit thicker of a pad between the base plates and the actual concrete. Okay? There has never been, and there will never be, an instance where you don't grout a rack. Concrete floors are flat, but they're not flat. Okay? When we're doing a rack, we need like 2 millimeters front to back and 2 millimeters front to back, 2 millimeters across, and 3 millimeters on the X. Okay? You're never going to find a concrete floor in anywhere that's flat. The other thing is even if you find a point that looks flat, there are sections of the rack that you have to grout underneath, right? So even if you had an area over here that was flat, it's going to either trail up or trail down, because you're on a scissor rack, you're going to do about yay long on the back, right? Wherever that, as the scissor rack goes up, the rear axle sort of like, pulls itself on the plastic. That whole entire plastic has to be supported by grout. We don't want the base plate doing a whoop-de-doo, okay? So, and we'll get into that when we get over to the scissor rack, or we can go over to WinOps before we leave. And you can see, we'll probably do it at WinOps before we leave. You can see where everything needs to be grouted, okay? Since those were put in 17 or 18, I don't know if they are the 1/4 inch or the 3/8, right? So, because it was before 22, okay? Again, so someone's going to ask, no one's asked yet, what happens if you have an epoxied floor? What happens if you have a tiled floor, right? Because what we're going to get to here in a second is the most important thing that you guys have to be aware of is anchors, all right? The thing in red here, aura-filled hole, I asked for that the entire time I was out in the field, and they bothered to give it to me after I came inside. So at least you guys can have, because we always wondered how close you could be, because you were pulling out a rack, you were putting in a new rack. I needed to know how close could I be to the old anchors, right? And then it was not there, because when it was in black, it didn't give us that. So now what you're supposed to do on a hole, you're supposed to pound the anchor all the way through. You're supposed to use the grout that comes with the new rack. You're going to mix some up. You're going to stuff it in the hole. You're filling the hole so that the hole left to right is just as solid as the concrete around it. So you're basically mending the floor at that point. Okay. The other thing they did is we didn't used to have the 1/2 inch diameter parameter. We only had the 3/4 and the 7/8 parameters, which basically meant back in the day you could put a scissor rack wherever you wanted, because they never gave us any guidelines on what we were supposed to do with a scissor rack. Because scissor racks only use 1/2 inch diameters. 3/4 diameter and 7/8 diameters are for our 4-post, which most of you guys have seen the 4-post. The front post isn't all the way across, right? So the front posts have to use the concrete itself to keep from falling in, which is why on the outsides, they're 7/8 inch anchors, and then in the middle on the insides, they're 3/4, because it's the outside that has the most amount of stress, because the posts are trying to pull in, so we're giving it a little extra oomph on the end of the plate.
So if somebody pulls out a rack and they leave, they just cut the bolts.
Mm-hmm. That is technically not a filled-in hole, right?
If you're in a pit, you don't have that much room to move around.
You actually took one out of a pit and put a new one in a pit.
Say if that would be the case. Well, that one that we did, it's an old rack. Like, they're gonna need a new one eventually. And they just built this room. They built an alignment room like off the side of the building. So it's all brand new poured, but that rack's eventually, it's a piece of crap. I was thinking the whole time, like, why the hell would they not just spend the money to get a new rack? It's like a brand new building.
You're a service manager. You know they don't spend money on equipment.
Well, I know, but they're gonna hear about 3-4 years. I mean, that thing was rusting out.
So
Nasty.
if that's the case, then the new rack's not even going to fit in the pit, because our new racks are longer than our old racks.
Oh, nice. That's
Right.
a new pit.
an RX-14 and RX-16. RX-14 is 11 inches longer than it used to be.
Well, that grout is like the Cougar Dam right now. Probably still trying.
It's up, still done. So at some point they're going to have to come in and cut the back out, all right? Because it's longer. They probably can get away with doing the front, but you won't be at 11 inches. You're not going to be anywhere near where the old ones were.
Of the air hoses and everything.
Everything, all right? Because it's because it has to be balanced, right? So it's so much. That's why there's those plates, right? It's got that little filler plate, right? And then the back end is longer too. So everything's just different. Who has the guy who was complaining to me? Oh, that was Dale at NADA. Okay. If you're doing a 4-post, a lot of people cheat and they use on a 4, because newer 4-posts are about 8 or 9 inches longer than old 4-posts. So what a lot of people do is the front 3 bolts on the old 4-post, they move and then they use the front 3 bolts as the back 3 bolts, all right? Because they're about the same. Are you supposed to do that? I don't think so, but people do it. Did I do it? Maybe. No, use the same. No, not the same holes. The same anchors. Yeah. Yes, it is. Which is why, read the anchoring guide before you do it. But so, well, not only that, if you try to go 7 inches in front of that first hole, right? You're probably, for whatever reason, dealerships like to make those knee walls or those half walls, right? So then you can't push the aligner any further back. You can't move the rack that far forward because you won't even fit in the bay. So a lot of people compromise and they'll use the front holes as the back holes at that point. So you don't? Yeah, you just pound them down. They're all wedge anchors, which is why in a minute you'll see in here that it gives you the base plate and then it tells you how much around the base plate has to be free of cracks, joints, and whatever, right? You can't just there has to be enough room around the base plate so that it has a good grip. The 494 is interesting. The 494 from the center of the post, it's either 45 or 51 inches square that post needs good concrete, which is like a lot bigger because the car 4-post is 18,000 pounds and it only needs 7 inches around the base, 7 or 8, right? But I guess because it's 35,000 pounds, they want a big pad. So.
Wouldn't it just make more sense to do the entire foot of the rack as opposed to just doing pads for the rack to sit on?
We're gonna get to that. So glad you asked. You're about 6 pages too early. We're gonna get there though. Thank you though. I'm glad he's thinking. He's always thinking. Most days he overthinks it, but today he's doing good. So, all right, distance. So, you have a crack and you have a joint. Anyone want to give me why we have 2 differences between a crack and a joint? So, what is a crack? Is a crack straight? A crack is craggly, right? And a crack may not go straight down. A crack may go to the side, or the crack may go like this. So cracks itself are almost like tectonic plates, right? They rub on each other. So a crack has a little bit more permanency, right? But a joint is a joint. The other thing you have to remember is that a joint is also the end of the concrete pad. Because you guys are going to be putting racks all the way in like the very first bay. And the very first bay is from like here to the wall, right? And then at the wall, that's just the end of the concrete, right? So you have to be careful if you're really, 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 really close to the wall that you actually have enough distance between the outside holes and the actual end of the concrete, okay? That's only happened to me once in my lifetime. The guy actually had to dig out from underneath the wall, and he actually had to pour a whole new pad in the front, but it had to go all the way to the end of the concrete. So I don't know how he managed to dig out underneath this is just metal studs, but he had to dig out. It was crazy. We're really, so this is what I'm talking about. If you have a tile floor, I didn't know where your cracks or your joints are. You don't, but we don't hold that against you either, right? What are you supposed to do? Like, hold your hand on the floor? Yeah, it's not there, right? So if, get the divining rods out, right? So if it's a tiled floor, you get a pass, right? Because you don't know what the floor looked like before they put the tile on. Those of you in cold climates, if you guys don't have a thermal camera, now's a great time to buy a thermal camera because it's a business write-off because you don't want to hit the cooling tubes, right? Now, you can also ask the dealership before you start, hey, have someone come out and map the cooling tubes for me, right? Because the last thing you want is water. If water starts bubbling up out of the pad, now some places are smart and they do it in sections, but some places it's the whole entire service drive, right? So yeah, but some places it's almost like a grid, and they have it's almost like circuit breakers where you can just turn off part of the floor. But some places they just do the whole entire. So the last thing you want to do is drill through a coolant tube, right? So it is not. So they make for like $199, you can get a FLIR and it attaches to your phone, and then you download the app, and then you can use the $199 thing to see the floor. Or if you don't want to take on that level of responsibility, again, have the customer have someone come out with a FLIR and turn the heat up. Even in the summertime, you can still turn the heat on and it'll still show up because the concrete's cooler. It's not much cooler, but it's cooler. And then he can sort of map out the grid for you so you can try to, wiggle it in, okay? So obviously the bigger the diameter of the bolt, the more concrete we need because it has to hold it to the floor, okay? The next thing we hit is grout thickness, okay? We give you anchors that'll go up to 1 inch of grout. As soon as you hit 1 inch of grout, you have to buy longer anchors, okay? Now the thickness of the grout is from the floor to the bottom of the base plate. It's literally the air gap between literally how much you're going to be shoving in, okay? You'd be surprised how many normal installs you're going to go on that one end of the rack is going to be more than 1 inch thick of grout. Because there's usually a drain. It's either in the back or the front, right? There's usually a drain somewhere, right? So you're gonna end up buying more anchors in your lifetime than you thought you were gonna buy, just because the sales guy goes in and the floor is great, it'll be fine. Then you get in there and it's like Mount Everest. So, theoretically, after 3 inches of grout, you're not supposed to put 3 inches of grout. You're supposed to get shims. And on a couple of more pages, we actually have what happens if you need shims. Shims are usually only on 4 posts. I ran into two times. They're both in my area too. Dave sucked. He never had to have shims. I had to have shims twice in my area. Anyway, the other thing we finally did is we finally gave you a torque spec. But what's weird is it's not a single number. How do you have a range for a torque spec? I guess it depends on, I was going to say on the, what do they call the PSI, right? Yeah, the tensile strength of the concrete, right? We give you a range. That is not a torque spec. That's like a torque suggestion. Yeah. Yeah, so, this one's funny. It's like 200 to 250. That's a heck of a range right there, right? It's like, I don't know, it could be tight, could be real tight, you're gonna be pulling anchors up through the concrete at 250. I don't think I shaved this morning.
Most everybody pours that 6-act concrete.
I'm pretty sure I didn't. It was a weird morning this morning. No wonders I got to eating breakfast earlier than I thought. I was like, man, it's like 6:55.
Those 7/8, those really on the sides.
Yeah, yeah. So like your half-inch anchor is 50 to 60 pounds. It's only 10. Yeah. So, you guys, he just talks all the time. You ever notice that? He loves talking. He loves talking more than I do. He loves talking. You guys at the end of this week are going to be rack installation experts according to CarMax. CarMax is going to dub you. They're going to knight you. Rack. So once a year, CarMax is going to send out a central service call. And in that central service call, you are now a rack inspector. So you have another hat to put on. You're the rack inspector for CarMax. The good news is when you go out to CarMax to inspect their rack, we have like a 3-page thing that has little check boxes. And it's like, how do the wheel clamps look? How do you're actually going to have to torque the bolts. Because one of the questions in that little thingy with the little check box is, did you torque all the bolts? And they actually want you to torque all the bolts. Okay, and most CarMaxes have 4-posts, just because they don't know what kind of car they're going to get, right? So a lot of them have 4-posts. So, it's like inspect the slip plates, inspect the turn plates. Does this move freely? Is the aligner powering on? Does it have the current software version? What your specs does it have? Just stuff, right? Look at the cables, look at the pulleys. Are the nuts on the end of the cables tight? So you're going to have your 2.5 inches and 2 1/4 inches, and you're gonna have to go up there and go, and just see if the jam nuts tight and stuff like that.
If you find issues, do you have to submit an estimate?
Yeah, that's a different, because there's no rack that you're ever gonna come to that's just gonna pass first time. Right? You need at least $5,000 per rack to keep up your current. If it spins, it better not spin. So don't make it spin. So see the 200-pound end? That's all right. Now Steve's gonna be on the. I'm at the 200-pound end, right? I don't want that kind of pain. All I was here to do was make my $138 and go home. So, I'm making my $138, calling it good and going home, right? You can add washers, right? Because what's happening is where the anchor is, but if you pull it up just a little bit, right? Because it's a cone, it's a wedge anchor, it's a cone anchor. So as you pull the bottom through, the cone's going to move back out. So if you can move it up just, a little bit, right? Whether you add a washer or 2 washers, right? Now, you have to be careful. You need to measure out your grout and then measure out how much of the stud is sticking above the concrete, right? Because there is a minimum embedment. I think it tells us the minimum embedment. Again, I don't want to give out a number, but I'm pretty sure I know the number. Because if you do all of that measuring and the head of the anchor is not deep enough in the concrete, you're just going to pull the concrete right up. So
I don't think ours was, but everybody kept saying that's not my install. But
yes, because the rack
was up so high that rotary drill, when you went down, it didn't go all the way through the concrete.
That's okay.
But we couldn't do anything about it.
No. Well, you could have bought a longer bit, but you were women. Didn't want to spend any money.
It was like 4 1/4 inches of ground.
I had 26-inch bits.
Oh, wow.
This is my Hilti. I could get extra long bits. My bits were like this.
Well,
right? Every time.
Well, they had
dirt or someone from the other side of the world. I was drilling all the way through the core.
They had a Bosch. This is how messed up this is. They had a Bosch vacuum cleaner, which was like top of the line. It was like a phenomenal Bosch vacuum cleaner shop vac. They had a DeWalt rotary drill, and they had a Milwaukee attachment that went on the rotary drill for the vacuum.
No.
What kind of wizardry is this shit?
So yeah, because they didn't want to get fined $10,000 in case the OSHA inspector came by, because you're putting too much silica dust in the air.
Is there any limit to how tall the grout can be?
It says up to 3. It says 4 inches. So at that point, you're going to have
Build the
shims.
floor.
Well,
You're just going to have to get thicker shims. Yeah.
yeah,
Some-
I saw one where the pit was dug too deep.
Okay.
And it may or may not have been longer than 4 inches.
Come back to that concrete, fuck that.
So again, you can get shims. You can just make the shims thicker.
The shims go underneath the pad of the.
Mhm. They're actually cut out.
They come with the is something you buy.
Oh no, that's something the owner has to buy, right? Because the owner's floor is messed up.
Once you reach your third bucket of mortar, you know something's wrong.
I don't know what theirs looks like.
Maybe turn glass.
A little horseshoe looking shape things.
So this is on 2 different pages, and I can't quite put it in here. So here's a shim for the rear of a scissor rack, right? Here's a shim for the front of a scissor rack, because the front of the scissor rack's just a pad. The horseshoe one is kind of interesting on page 5. Most of the time on a scissor rack, you won't run into it. Usually you run into it on 4 posts.
Hey Jim, I don't like to look at page 9.
Oh yeah, you're gonna love page 9.
Second floor installation.
Yep, we can do that.
No thank
They're
you.
putting up
Those
a
are
massive
the TikToks you see pour on the second floor, and then it just falls through.
That's Houston and Dallas Road.
So if you're doing a second floor installation, whatever you do, do not hit a post tension cable. Do not hit a pre-tension cable.
Yeah.
You will end up on the first floor very quickly.
Yeah.
So, at that
Expressway down.
at that point, you're going to have to get someone to come out to mark where the post tension, pre-tension, because some are pre, some are post, depends on how they built it. But you got to have someone to mark out the cabling, because you hit it, that building's condemned, right? You can't fix it. You can't fix that. Yeah, there is no fixing it.
It's a long cable that they pretty much use for either post or pre-tension that goes through the concrete. And it has anchors on each side of the building that hold a certain tension. And if you hit that, the whole building's been compromised.
Yeah. I get that. I get that part.
My house.
You need a needle essentially to come in and tell you where to
Was it?
they should do the drilling.
Yeah.
You need a needle from your.
So,
Yeah.
No, you-
like,
they're big cables.
yeah.
You still don't want to hit it.
No, but you got to work pretty hard to go through.
So basically, what you're saying is they hang them for the
Right.
concrete that's laid, then they put that the accordion style stuff on. You know,
Rebar?
No, like the bottom.
Yeah, it's up and down and up and down and up and down. It's shiny. It's like zinc or aluminum, right? And then that's what the concrete, because the concrete, yeah. It's like the floor. Oh, thank you.
Would they lay rebar on a second floor?
I would assume, because it still has to be reinforced. But the problem with the rebar is rebar will still sag, which is why they do the pre-tension, post-tension cables, because it's the cables that keep everything up.
They use a lot of fiberglass in there.
Yeah, a lot of fiberglass.
Why?
Oh, fiber and concrete is nasty.
The hot and cold.
Holy cow, that it's terrible to drill through.
This is the type of engineering that I don't know.
Anyone ever try to cut down a sweet gum tree? You guys never tried to cut down a sweet gum tree? Drilling through fibers and concrete is like trying to cut down a sweet gum tree. It's impossible. Super hard.
My garage, they came back and
Is it
actually
possible
cut
to get CAD drawings of the ship, the various ships?
No, this is what you get. So so you're not one.
Website and send those ships.
One, it's not your problem. It's the owner's problem. 2, if you give this to the owner's going to find the steel working guy, and the steel working guy is going to go, I can make that, right? Because it's basically a big steel blank. He just has to know where to drill the holes, right? And as long as he knows where to drill the holes, right? So then we even give you the 1/2-inch diameter in 4 places, right? Because you still have to put leveling bolts on it, right? The other thing is, here, welding, right? Work to be done by a certified welder, low hydrogen wire rod, 70,000 PSI welding for this shim only. This is not a blank, right? So you have to weld the shim to the base plate and put the grout between the shim and the floor. We don't want you to put the shim on the floor and then grout between the shim and the base plate. So at that point, your base plate's like 5 inches thick, right? And then it's tack welded all the way around, or not tack welded, but welded. So the dude has to come out, grind away the powder coat, right? Because you can't weld the powder coating. He's gonna have to grind the powder coating away. He's gonna have to weld the base plate to the shim, and then the worst part about that is your leveling bolts are now coming in from the bottom rather than the top. And trying to level a 4-post with bolts that are backwards, yeah, open-ended wrench, right? Because the heads of the bolts are now touching the floor, right? And then you always go the wrong way because you're so used to going like this to level out a rack, and then you're making it shorter instead of longer. It's terrible. So anyway, we give you everything you need. We give you all the instructions you need. All right. Hopefully you guys won't need shims. Like I said, I've only needed shims twice. Doesn't happen all that often. Where are we on page 9? Alternate anchors. If you do have one spinning, someone asked about a spinning anchor, right? Usually if you do alternate anchors, you have to drill the hole out by 1/8 of an inch, right? So if it's a 3/4 inch, you'd make it a 7/8. If it's a 7/8, you'd make it a 1 inch. Then you have to adhere exactly to the alternate anchor manufacturer, right? Because you have to drill the hole out. Then there's a special brush that you have to brush to get all the dust out of it. And then you spooge in the epoxy, and then you take your threaded rod and you tap the threaded rod through the epoxy that you just put in the hole. Then you have to wait so many days. I'm sorry? Yeah, the 2-part epoxy hardens itself, right? Because it's almost like JB Weld, right? You got the black and you got the white, and it turns into a gray, and then it hardens itself. So if you do find yourself with a spinning anchor, you can go to an alternative because, again, you make it bigger. Only if the dude before you drilled all the way through, right? Dude before you only drilled 4.5 inches deep because he knew he wasn't going to hit it. You hit that anchor and it gives you that solid thud in return. When that anchor has hit the concrete rather than going through, and then you have that sinking feeling, and you just have that sinking. It is a bad day, right? Because that anchor is not coming out and is not going down, which is why when you drill, you bring up dirt every time. Every time you bring up dirt. If you don't bring up dirt, keep drilling until you bring up dirt, right?
Did you ever deal with a company called Terracon?
What do they do?
They did a lot for when we were putting like greenhouses in schools. They had to come out and test that stud and everything was hard before we could put the post or anything up.
Oh yeah, no, it's just because we don't use. Are you talking for alternative anchors? Yeah. So it's these people here are going to tell you here a high piece of B7 high strength steel. So whatever that is, I don't know what that is. I've never used alternative anchors, but we even tell you what type of all thread you're going to use, right? It has to be whatever that's obviously it's a hardness. I don't know, right?
The bad stud out.
You never pull a bad stud out. There's no way to pull it out. Yeah.
So the injection literally just injects the high strength epoxy into.
Well, you have to pound the anchor down. You're always pounding anchors down. One, you can't leave the anchor because two, the epoxy is so thick it's not going to go around it because you have to drill the hole out bigger, right? So you have to hit the anchor down because there's no other way to do this. So you're hitting the anchor down. You're going to oversize the hole because there has to be enough space for the epoxy, to go around the threads of the bolt and into the hole. And then, obviously you take some and you're pushing it through the hole, and then it makes a nice, underneath.
As well as those glass capsules that pound it down and breaks the glass. That's like
Okay, I've never used that.
It's the same. It's the same.
I'm sure it is. I just know these guys here. A lot of people, rather than using that kit, a lot of people Hilti makes, because they make their own anchors. They make their own adhesion stuff, right?
They just tell them how to buy them. Those are like the black body. You're out there.
Yeah.
We'll take your threaded rod, just
Okay.
push it in there.
It says inquire about an injection kit. It says you can order if you wanted to keep to the I'm sure somewhere it says or equivalent on there, right? So as long as you're using something, right? And not JB Weld. Right, we don't use JB Weld. Concrete rules. Here's the concrete rules. Second floor installations. Again, problem resolution, try to move the rack, find another bay, pour a new pad. We're going to get the pads in a minute. If you have a dude who decides that he is smarter than Hunter Engineering and he knows that his pad is fine even though you say it's not fine, he can hire, not you, he can hire a local professional engineer. And it's literally a PE, right? So dude's going to have to go out and shop around for a PE. PE is going to come out. He's going to do a thickness test. He's going to do how much calcium's in it, how much water's in it. He's going to look for brittle, right? He's going to check the thickness, and then he's going to come back with a solution, right? Again, I've had 2 people hire a PE because I said, I am not putting that rack where you want that rack, because I was not comfortable with the concrete and anchoring guide that Hunter Engineering would be happy. So what happens is he hires a PE. The PE takes a month or 2 to get his sweet time because he's a PE and he ain't Russian. Unless he is Russian, but then he's not European. And then he's going to give you a copy of his report. You're going to email that report, and then our lawyers and our PEs look at that PE, and then what we do is that PE basically is inheriting all the risk from our PEs, right? So in case that rack still goes over, we're not held liable because he put his name on the thing. We keep a copy of it forever, and if anything ever happens, we'll just pull out our copy and go, hi, go talk to this guy, because we said no, but he said yes. So you're still in trouble because you're the one who put it in. But now it's up to the local PE to, figure out why it fell over and not us. Okay. Takes a long time. The PE is going to come up with some really wild, you got to do this, or that to make it fit. I ended up putting both racks in. Still wasn't happy about it. But, it happens. So. Usually someone at this point comes to me and asks me what happens if you get someone to sign a waiver. A waiver will never hold up in court, right? The defense lawyer is going to be like, well, he didn't know what he was signing. You basically threatened him that the rack couldn't go in that day, so he was under duress because all of a sudden he had 10 minutes to figure out if he wanted to sign this piece of paper. So if you're trying to put a 4-post in and you only have 2 3/4 inches of concrete, stop. Get out the clear Krylon, because you're going to be marking the floor and you're going to spray the floor, because when you mark it, everyone's just going to walk over it and then it won't be there. And you're going to have to pull everything back out of the bay. You're going to mark it, and then you're just going to wait for the concrete guy to come by. And 7 or 8 days later, you'll go back and put the rack in. So theoretically, and it's probably somewhere in your contract, either before or the same day or the day after your salesman sells a rack, you're supposed to go out and you're supposed to do like a core sample, right? You're supposed to drill a hole, take your little hook pick tool, pick the bottom of the rack, hold it with your thumb, pull it out, and measure how much concrete there is, okay? I was really good at that for the first year in the field. My sales guy said, hey, I just sold a rack over at John Smith Chevrolet. And I'd go over and, you just ish, right? Because you don't know exactly where it's going to go. So you're like, I don't know, that looks like a great place to drill a hole, right? Either a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 hole, because you don't need too much. All I got to do is stick a pick in it, right? And you just got to find the end of the concrete at the other end. I did it for about a year. And 1, I got busier. And 2, I was like, it looks good for my house. I think out of all the racks we put in, I don't know, less than 10 times did that bite me in the butt. Of course, the 8 to 9 times it did bite me in the butt, it was uncomfortable, right? Because
At what part in the process do you realize you fucked up?
you drilled the hole for the post. right? The old rack is out, and the guy bought the new rack. Either you took the old rack or the distributor took the old rack, so now they don't have an alignment rack. It's like you get there at 7 in the morning, you lay the bay out, you spend an hour getting your posts all perfect. You drill that first hole and it went burp, and you're like, well, the day is now over, and it's 9:30 in the morning. It's gonna be a long day. Yeah, so then you have to pull the posts out, right, and you mark again. You mark the floor, right? The concrete guy's just going to cut wherever you mark the floor. So you're going to mark the floor. That is at least your responsibility. You have to tell the concrete guy where to cut. Right, guy has to know someone. That's why when you snap your chalk lines, you spray them with the clear Krylon, because people are just going to walk over it, and then the guy won't have any. So, and then it's another 8 days. So now the guy's down without an alignment rack for like a week and a half. Right, the guy usually not happy with it. Right. Happened to me one time on a used 4-post. Oh, that was terrible. Because at that point, the salesman's usually selling the 4-post, right? Because he took it in on trade. So then the salesman says, hey, I'll do it for this much. And then you have to come back with the bad news that the concrete floor only has 2 3/4 inches of concrete. And the sales guy's like, Then he asks you if you want to participate in pouring the pad. And you say, no. Salesmen will always ask if you want to participate. They're good at that. So they always want you to participate. All right. Real quick, I know it's getting late, but I got to go over this, because if I don't go over this, 2 posts. Yeah, we're not talking about 2 posts. 4 posts. So here's a 4-post. This is whatever page this is, 11, 12. This is probably the most used page in the whole entire concrete and anchoring guide. Okay. Again, scissor racks don't use the concrete to stand up. 4-posts use the concrete to stand up. I will not deviate on a 4-post open front rack. That is, you got 18,000 pounds on you and you're underneath it and you're doing dumb things underneath it to begin with. The last thing you want is a post coming over on you. Okay, so on the rears are relatively small, because on the rears it's a point load, right? It's just going up and down, up and down, up and down, and up and down, because the rear of a 4-post has a whole beam, right? So there's no left to right. We don't have any twisting action or pulling action. On the front post, however, you can either do a half a slab, like if only one side is too thin, or you can do a full slab. Okay, personally, you might as well just do a full slab. Why do you want this side to be on a different slab than this side, right? At least if they're both on the same slab and it's new concrete, right? So it tells you needs to be at least 5 inches thick, right? It needs to be a little thicker than the concrete around it, right? You got to have your rebar spaced, right? You got to have 4 inches of rebar from the surface. It needs to be keyed, which means you have to put in all these little half pieces of rebar all the way around, right? So not only is the concrete a little bit thicker, so the concrete will like spooge out underneath your existing concrete, but now you're pinning it into the existing concrete. If the dude does it right, when you put your posts back on, you won't hit a piece of rebar. Or if you don't do it right and he doesn't do it right, now you're drilling through a piece of rebar. That's always fun. I hated drilling through rebar. Anyway, you give this to the concrete guy, and the concrete guy will basically send you a Christmas card, because you gave him everything he needs to know. The only thing you have to do, once again, is you have to mark the floor. Right? So it's 192 by 60. Right? And that's basically all you're going to do, is you're just going to snap the chalk lines, mark it on the floor. All right. Call it a day. Come back in about a week. I think it says 8 days. Somewhere. Anyway. Concrete loads. That's another thing you have to be careful of. Yeah. Or what they use for the concrete. Okay. Where's it at? Where did it go? Yeah, did I go the wrong way? Depending on what type of concrete he uses, 12, 11, 10. All right. You have traditional concrete, which says you got to wait. Traditional concrete must age 7 days before installing. Then you have to wait another 7 days, which is 14, before you can actually. So at 14 days, you can finally torque your anchors, and then you can only use it for 75%. Okay. Everyone usually goes for this method here, right? 5,000 psi. That's some really tough concrete, right? 5,000 psi, type 3 or type 3A Portland cement, right? Fast setting concrete, you have to wait 4 days. This is why we always just come back in a week, because after a week, not only can you put the, right, that's just setting the anchors. You can't even place a load on it, right? At least after 8 days, you can put the 4-post on it. You can tighten down the anchors. You can tell the guy, look, you can only use it for 75% for another 8 days, and then you can finally go all the way up to 18,000 pounds. But at least the guy can use it for like most cars and stuff like that. Yeah. This is what most people do. Now you have to take the concrete dude's word that that's what he used, right? It's not like you know anything about this and you can come out there and figure out if he used the right concrete or not. The concrete guy, you give him this, plus, so you don't even give him this part. You just give him this part, right? So you give him the bottom half of page 10, page 11. You say, this is what I need. And the concrete guy's like, you are amazing. Because you give that to concrete, the concrete guy's happy. He knows exactly what's expected of him, right? And then he charges like, I don't know, $8,000. Concrete guys and plumbers, they make a lot of money. So that's the concrete and anchoring guide. All right? Read it, love it, obey it.
I have a question about what does it mean PSI concrete? I haven't been on.
That's how much it takes to crush it. So, they put it in one of those things where the ram comes down and the needle goes up, and before it can break in half, it has to hit 5,000 pounds per.
That's a lunch video suggestion. The hydraulic press channel.
Yeah, the hydraulic press channel. Yeah. That's good stuff. You know what I love about the hydraulic press? Do you ever try to see them do a Prince Rupert drop? It actually breaks the press before it won't actually crack. Yeah. No, it's crazy. All the time.
Yeah, all the time.
You can use it instead of rebar. Fiberglass is
They use fiberglass over rebar.
fiberglass is crazy.
Make it stronger.
It's very strong, and what happens is since it's got fiberglass, it doesn't give you dust. It just gums up, and your bit is like, it's super hard to drill through.
They can have fiberglass at the concrete when they mix it.
Yeah.
And then they have mesh mats that they can put in
Yeah.
and push down in the concrete.
I think you always walk with the building manager before, and at least get the plans for.
I was told I can drop all the way
You
to
will.
on my gym and fucking concrete.
I didn't. You will. I never bothered. I just put the thing in. Yeah.
I just locked them as little as possible. Probably never hear.
I went with JJ when we were there with the architects and everything. We went over like full building specs, every they went through adding new doors for days. Like it was a whole ordeal. It was like an hour and a half meeting of just talking to these wizard things. Pretty much.
So, is it an existing building or a new building? Everything you just asked. If you're looking for ducting and concrete and all those other crazy things that I've never asked for.
If it's a new building on all that system
So,
building, they have to go try to find
yeah.
a building. It's not gonna fucking work.
Yeah, it's like in the basement somewhere. They don't want to look for it. I know. I see both. I found like a new site.
So again, if it's a new site, at least they'll have the building plans there. They could go to the GC contractor's office. All you're going to do is make that guy mad, but you're more than welcome to make that guy mad, because that guy is just like perennially mad. Doesn't matter who walks into his office. He's just like, what are you doing here? He just doesn't want to see anybody. I don't know. You're just, I love you to death, but you're just an engineer, and there's nothing I can do with you. So, Yeah, no, it's just the way you, no, it's just the way you work. Again, it's just the way, it's just, yes, no, I understand. No. Um,
We're on the other side of that.
you know, if
All of this information.
if you have, if well, you've been on an install already. Did you go on an install with Wes?
Yeah, I've done a few.
Right? On a rack.
Yeah,
Did he ever ask for any of that?
yeah. You got we did a second floor.
Oh, second floor is different. Second floor is different.
We have plans.
Right. Well, because you can't hit the cables. Right?
Yeah. I wasn't. No. Well, for existing buildings, the guys
Yeah.
knows what they did.
They just sent it.
Yeah, the guy we did have one with when I was with Bruce. We got there and everything was
Mhm.
all the equipment was there, and then we did a test hole, and the concrete was 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
And we had to stop.
Yeah. And then you were snapping lines because you had to cut it out. Yeah. Again, older buildings, because there's racks all over the place in older buildings, right? You got all the 2 posts, you got all of that. Most people just put the rack in because it's like you're either gonna. So at an older building, you have 2 choices. You either have enough concrete or you don't have enough concrete. And those are your defining. If I have enough concrete, the thing's going in today. If I don't have enough concrete, well, we got to get the concrete guy out. Again, coolant pipes. Plumbing is usually a minimum of 18 inches down, right? You're not going to hit plumbing. Shouldn't hit plumbing. Never say never. Shouldn't. I had some long bits, but usually too, they don't run stuff under because they know where they usually in the service bay, they keep it very sparse, right? You know, they try not to run the electrical conduits underneath the service bay because they know what's going there, right? The guy who builds the building, they're gonna run it underneath like the ladies' bathroom or the show floor where they're not drilling holes into the concrete, right? You have to have some faith in your fellow engineers. I know engineers don't because all the other engineers are dumb because I get it. But you have to have a little bit of faith in your other trades. Just a little. So obviously on a 4-post, you're going to want to get it so on a 4-post. If you get it too close to where the post is going to be, now you're your own worst enemy, right? So what I would do on a 4-post is I would know about where the fronts are, figure out the middle, right? Find the middle. Well, it's just a 1/2-inch hole. It's just a 1/2-inch hole, right? You'll be all right. Nah, when I put the rack in. Yeah. But yeah, you just because you got grout everywhere, right? You just fill it in. That's fine.
Send it and hope that nothing goes bad.
Well, again, if it's an existing building, they're more than likely already had a rack in the bay. You're just moving it either up a little bit or back a little bit. And again, the only thing I would be worried about in New York State is coolant tubes, right? So that's an actual real, not that the other stuff's not real, but that's a like even in older buildings, they're still going to have coolant tubes, right? So if you bought the infrared camera, just have them turn the heat up, right? And then again, you could either ask the customer to do that, like maybe you don't have time to do it or you don't want to accept the responsibilities for doing it. So put it back on the owner, right? It's his building. You're like, hey, I'm coming in to put this rack in. I would very much like not to hit a cooling tube. Can you please have someone come out? But because you order the rack doesn't show up the next day, right? The guy, the guy, hopefully the guy calls you and says, hey, I just sold a rack, right? You got 3 weeks, right? So sometime in 3 weeks, hopefully he can get someone out there with a thermal camera to shoot the ground and then spray and he doesn't have to spray the whole entire bay. He just has to spray the bay where the front posts are, where the rear posts are, right? Doesn't have to do the middle. Not drilling in the middle. You're just drilling, on the 2 ends. Other than that, again, they try not to run a lot of stuff in the service bay, only because they know you're going to be drilling holes, right? Second story, you need to do your due diligence, right? Someone has to come out and mark the cables. And the only way to do that is if someone has to have the architectural plans. But again, it's his building, right? That's not on you. Now, you need to ask him to mark it, and then if he refuses to mark it, personally, I'd get something in writing, because the last thing I want to do is hit a cable and condemn the whole building. So at least I want something in writing that the owner was unwilling to mark the tension cables for me on a second floor install, right? Because yeah, because you have a lot of second floor buildings. It's easier to build up than out because you guys are all tight in there, right? But second floors are weird and coolant tubes are weird. Other than that, you're just going to show up to the job and you're just going to throw that thing in there. You're just going to throw the thing in. South Texas, you don't have to worry about coolant tubes. You ain't got no, maybe air conditioning tubes, but you ain't got no heating tubes. All right.
Is the customer on the hook for the concrete, or are we in charge of the contract?
No. So technically what happens, your distributors know everybody, right? You know a guy. Your distributor knows a guy who knows a guy. Anything happens west of the Mississippi, he'll know in 2 days, right? That line, right? So that was a good movie. Come on, really? Never mind. Usually your distributor is very hooked up. Okay, so you call the sales guy calls the distributor, because the sales guy and the distributor worked hand in hand to sell it anyway. You're going to call yourself. It's fine. Third person. Call yourself in third person. You'll be like, Connor? You'll be like, yes, Connor. Guess what, Connor? I don't know Connor. Right? So you're going to call your sales guy and you're going to be like, dude, 2 inches of concrete, because he actually had 2 inches of concrete. So I'm actually glad that happened to you. I only got 2 inches of concrete. You're going to have to get the concrete guys out. Then the sales guy calls the distributor. The distributor knows a guy who does either concrete or welding or both. Okay? But it's actually usually 2 different people, but he has enough people lined up. And then again, you mark the lines, because I'm sure you and Wes snapped the lines, right? Painted them. Concrete guy comes out, cuts it, drills it, evacuates enough so that it's deep enough, right? Throws in some number 57, right? Taps it down a little bit.
So those are the only size masonry bits we'll need: half, 3/4.
You'll also need a 1/4 inch for the cover channel, and for the console, you need a 1/4 inch drill bit.
You mentioned like a paper trail of all of the specifications, just in case something goes wrong.
What kind of specifications?
I don't know, like the correspondence has concrete person knowing that they, I don't know, what happens if overthinking it. I got it.
What I'm probably gonna do to
Well-
my butt is make sure if I'm installing racks, they get a copy of this every time. As long as I know they got a copy of this.
Is it just like
Yeah.
print this out somewhere, or?
You can keep ordering them or printing them out. You can print it out because you have a printer. You got the form number.
Yeah.
Sure. As long as they got a copy of this.
You ever heard
I'm-
of paralysis by analysis?
He's gonna be stuck.
Coded high.
Well, I appreciate him. At least he's trying to break free of the mold, right? He's been living the mold for 20-something years, right? He's not just gonna like snap out of it and like, be quote unquote normal. It's tough. Yeah. The like I said, the only 2 emails I ever kept was the PE emails. Okay? So in case something happened to that rack, I had a copy of the PE report, and then hopefully